Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are focusing our attention on a state that, well, I think a lot of people just sort of categorize in their minds as a simple plains state.
Right.
Defined only by agriculture, its central location. We're traveling to the heart of the Great Plains, to Nebraska, but I assure you, what we found in the sources defies nearly every single stereotype.
It really does. I mean, it is the quintessential American heartland on the surface. But when you truly peel back the layers and you really examine its political and economic foundation, you find that Nebraska operates under a completely different set of structural rules than the other 49 states.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to take this really detailed stack of sources we have covering Nebraska's history, its economy, and that famously singular political system, and just distill the truly essential, surprising knowledge that allows you, our listener, to be genuinely well-informed about the Cornhusker State.
That structural divergence is exactly what defines this deep dive. Let's start with a snapshot of the fundamentals, because even the basics, they sort of set the stage for the paradoxes to come. We're talking about the Cornhusker State, and it operates under this really powerful motto: equality before the law.
And in terms of sheer size, Nebraska is substantial. It's the 16th largest state by land area.
But immediately you see that vastness of the American West just colliding with the realities of population density.
Yeah, exactly. With just over 2 million residents, based on 2024 estimates, it ranks as the 38th most populous. So that makes it the 8th least densely populated state in the country. It's just a place of enormous physical space surrounding these concentrated urban centers.
But against that backdrop of traditional plains geography, we find the two biggest structural exceptions that make Nebraska a political outlier.
And this is the core of it.
Number one, and this is the core institutional focus of our deep dive, the unicameral legislature. This is the only state in the entire United States that has rejected the bicameral, the two-house system, and opted instead for a single-house governing body.
And the distinction doesn't even end there with just the single chamber. The members, who they call senators, are elected in strictly nonpartisan races.
That part is just fascinating to me.
It's incredible. The party affiliation is omitted from the ballot entirely. It forces candidates to campaign and legislate based on local issues, on personality, rather than just relying on national party platforms. I mean, that difference just fundamentally alters the political incentives.
It does. It has to. It mandates a system where compromise and public consensus, in theory at least, take precedence over party rigidity. And then there's the second major structural divergence, which is how Nebraska manages federal elections, the split electoral college vote.
This is such a critical technical point. Only Nebraska and Maine allocate their presidential electoral votes by congressional district. They move away from that common winner-take-all model.
So how does that break down in Nebraska?
Nebraska awards 2 electoral votes to the statewide popular vote winner, but the remaining 3 votes are assigned based on the popular vote winner in each of the state's 3 separate congressional districts.
So what's the practical effect of that? I mean, even if the state as a whole votes overwhelmingly for one party.
Right, say Republican. The 2nd congressional district, which covers the dense urban core of Omaha, it can swing Democratic.
And it has.
It has, and that forces a split in the allocation. This has happened in several recent elections.
Yeah.
And gives that one urban pocket this kind of outsized national influence.
So the takeaway from this introduction is just crystal clear. Nebraska isn't just a traditional red state, it's a structural experiment in American governance. But to understand why it evolved this way, we have to start with the land itself and the name that defined it.
Absolutely. It all starts with the geography.
Okay, let's unpack the etymological roots of the state. The name Nebraska, it's not a settler invention. It's an anglicization derived from the original indigenous languages of the region.
Specifically, the name comes from the archaic Otoe term Nebrash, or you have the Omaha term Nebraska.
And they both mean the same thing.
They both mean flat water. And this isn't like a poetic or abstract reference. It's a literal description of the state's dominant geological feature.
That feature is, of course, the Platte River.
Of course.
It's shallow, it's wide, it's braided, and it flows right through the central portion of the state. Because of its flatness and width, it made an ideal but, well, sometimes a tricky route for early trappers and explorers, and then later for the westward trails. It dictated migration patterns for millennia.
And those migration patterns included various American Indian tribes. Historically, the sources confirm a major presence from the Omaha, the Missouri, Ponca, Pawnee, and Oto peoples.
Right.
What's really fascinating, though, is that the Lakota, or Sioux groups, were often later arrivals. They were migrating westward into the territory as well, which created this very dynamic and often conflict-ridden environment on the plains.
And this region was contested not just among tribes, but between European powers in the 17th and 18th centuries. You had both the French and the Spanish vying for control.
Yeah, mostly through trade networks with indigenous groups. Spain connected with the Apache out in the west, while France established these really crucial trade relationships all along the Missouri River.
The sources, though, they highlight one specific, really crucial event that shifted the balance of power decisively, and it's one that's often left out of general U.S. history.
The Villisher Massacre of 1720.
Exact.
This wasn't a skirmish. This was a strategic catastrophe for the Spanish.
So give us the details, because this narrative it's really compelling. After war broke out between Spain and France, Spain viewed the Nebraska territory as its own.
So Lieutenant General Pedro de Villasor led this substantial armed expedition north from Santa Fe. The idea was to scout and, frankly, to intimidate French traders and their indigenous allies.
And he traveled pretty far north.
He did. Villasor traveled as far north as the Platte River, near where present-day Columbus is. But instead of an easy reconnaissance mission, his expedition was just suddenly and violently attacked.
By who?
By a massive, highly coordinated force made up primarily of French allied Pawnee and Oto warriors. The Spanish were almost entirely wiped out, including Villasor himself.
Wow. And the consequence of that single engagement was, it must have been immense.
Oh, it was. It wasn't just a loss of life. It represented the definitive end of Spain's serious exploration or expansion efforts in the Nebraska region for the rest of the 18th century. It just solidified French trade dominance right up until the Louisiana Purchase brought American interests into play.
And American interest was formalized in 1819 with the establishment of Fort Atkinson.
Right, the first U.S. Army post west of the Missouri River. But the true demographic and political transformation, that started much later. It was really fueled by that push for continental expansion.
And the pivotal moment there came with the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854.
A very controversial piece of legislation. It created the Nebraska Territory, which was, it was initially huge.
It was, yeah. Not just Nebraska.
No, it included large portions of what would eventually become Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and the Dakotas. And significantly, it also included the concept of popular sovereignty for determining the status of slavery.
Which had a more immediate and, violent effect in neighboring Kansas.
Exactly. But that territorial creation, it set the stage for this massive rapid settlement period right after the Civil War.
After the U.S. government forced American Indian tribes to relinquish vast amounts of land through treaties and forced cessions, the Homestead Act of 1862 just threw open this territory to settlers.
And thousands of them claimed free land, fundamentally changing the landscape in just a couple of decades.
And this is where we get that classic enduring image of the Nebraska settler. Because trees were so rare and expensive, especially out in the western parts of the territory.
Right.
Many of the first farmers had to build their homes out of thick strips of earth and grass.
The famous sod homes. This wasn't a choice of preference. It was a necessity. It was dictated by the raw physical reality of a treeless prairie.
So the combination of free land and these agricultural innovations, it just led to a population boom that was nothing short of staggering.
Absolutely. The population soared from just sparse settlements to over 450,000 residents by the 1880s. And key technological developments, like the invention of barbed wire for fencing,
Huge.
the steel plow, which was capable of breaking that tough prairie sod, and then windmills to draw essential water, all of that made large-scale mechanized agriculture possible for the first time.
And that transformation led to statehood in 1867, making Nebraska the 37th state.
And interestingly, that political transition immediately demonstrated a keen sense of political symbolism. The capital was moved from Omaha to the smaller, more central town of Lancaster.
Which was immediately renamed Lincoln.
Right, honoring the recently assassinated president.
And one final detail from this historical segment, it really speaks to the close of the indigenous era of resistance, the Battle of Massacre Canyon.
Fought on August 5, 1873. This was the final major conflict between the Pawnee and the Sioux. This engagement, which was largely provoked by the Sioux, marked the end of large-scale intertribal warfare on the Central Plains.
And it coincides almost exactly with the complete dominance of American settlement.
It does. It really sets the stage for the modern state, a land defined by its rivers, its vastness, and a history of intense territorial conflict, which shifts us now to the physical lay of the land.
The geography of Nebraska really does explain its role as America's logistical connector. It's surrounded by 6 states, South Dakota to the north.
Yep, Iowa and Missouri forming that eastern border along the Missouri River, Kansas to the south, and then Colorado and Wyoming defining the western boundary.
And despite being this contiguous landmass, the state literally operates on 2 different schedules.
Right, the time zone split. The vast majority of the state, including Omaha and Lincoln, observe Central Time. But the Panhandle and the surrounding counties in the west, they operate under Mountain Time.
And that line, drawn right through the middle of the state, that's a very real functional divider for business and daily life.
It really is. The river system is the state's lifeline. You have 3 major systems flowing west to east. The Niobrara up in the north, the Republican River cutting across the south, and then, most critically, the Platte River system.
Which we know means flat water.
Exactly. The Platte is formed by the confluence of the North Platte and South Platte rivers, and its watershed is just the foundation for so much of the state's agriculture.
Geographically, the state splits very clearly along its length into 2 profoundly different major regions.
It does. The eastern side is what's known as the dissected till plains. This is the area that was repeatedly scoured by Ice Age glaciers, leaving behind these gently rolling hills and really rich, deep soil.
And that fertile land is where the population concentrated, right?
Yeah.
Leading to the development of the largest cities.
Precisely. Omaha and Lincoln are both right there in that region.
But then you move west and you transition into the Great Plains region, which covers the majority of the state. This is that classic treeless prairie, but it's far from monolithic. It includes these highly specialized ecosystems that demand adaptation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think of the unique, vast sand hills. It's one of the largest intact prairie ecosystems in the world, covering about a quarter of the entire state.
Wow.
And then you have the Pine Ridge, the rainwater basin, which is critical for migratory birds, the high plains, and the Wildcat Hills in the far west. It's a very diverse region that really forces land management and ranching over traditional row crops.
And speaking of the Great Plains, we have to mention the state's highest point, Panorama Point. With a name that grand, you'd expect some kind of dramatic alpine peak.
Well, what stands out here is the magnificent Nebraskan understatement.
Right.
Panorama Point sits at 5,424 feet near the Colorado border, yet the sources all confirmed that despite its name, it is a relatively low rise.
What does that even mean?
It's basically the highest point on a very large, gently sloped floor. There's no dramatic climb. It's just the apex of the high plains.
It's an elevation defined by what it isn't. That's wonderfully Nebraskan, isn't it?
It is.
It reflects the expansive, subtle geography of the plains, and this identity confusion is even embedded in the state's marketing history.
For decades, the slogan was, "Welcome to Nebraskaland, where the West begins." But the question was, well, where exactly did the West begin? Local towns and regions couldn't agree.
Right. I saw that. Various places claimed the title. Some said Missouri River, which is the obvious physical barrier.
Others claimed the 100th meridian, that historical divide between the humid east and the arid west. There's even a red brick star marking a spot at the intersection of 13th and O Streets in Lincoln. The state couldn't decide if it was the gateway to the west or the west itself.
Which leads directly to the current state tourism slogan, which is, frankly, refreshingly honest.
Honestly, it's not for everyone.
I love that. That self-deprecating candor is just a huge departure from the typical over-the-top boosterism you find in state marketing campaigns.
It really is.
Let's quickly detail the climate. The eastern two-thirds falls under a humid continental climate, sometimes dipping into humid subtropical conditions near the Kansas border.
Which means plenty of moisture for corn.
Exactly. Western Nebraska, conversely, is classified as semi-arid, reflecting that change in latitude and elevation.
And both sections experience these dramatic seasonal variations, hot, humid summers and brutally cold winters. However, the western portion does get a specific reprieve in winter from the Chinook wind.
Oh, right.
It's a warm, dry airflow that descends the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains, and it often provides a temporary, pretty significant warming or moderating effect.
But despite those moderating effects, Nebraska is firmly situated in Tornado Alley.
Oh, yes. Violent storms are common in spring, summer, and sometimes autumn. And the temperature records, they really reflect this volatility. A staggering high of 118 degrees Fahrenheit in Minden in 1936. juxtaposed with an extreme low of -47 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded at Camp Clark in 1899.
That is an incredible range.
Finally, we should acknowledge the federally managed lands that define the historical experience here. Beyond the Nebraska National Forest, you have the Oglala National Grassland. But more importantly, the great markers of the Oregon, Mormon, and California trails are preserved here.
Like Chimney Rock.
Exactly. Chimney Rock National Historic Site, Homestead National Monument of America, and Scotts Bluff National Monument. These places remind you that this flat waterland was the superhighway of 19th century America.
This landscape of contrast, from the fertile, dissected till plains to the arid sandhills, it required settlers and political thinkers to adapt and innovate. And that spirit of independent problem-solving is mirrored perfectly in the state's completely unique approach to government. This brings us to the unicameral anomaly.
This is the centerpiece of our deep dive. As we established, Nebraska is the only state in the United States with a single-house unicameral legislature. And the implications of this are enormous. It just shifts the power dynamics between citizens, legislators, and the governor.
In the body itself is officially just called the legislature or the unicameral.
Yeah.
And yes, the members, all 49 of them, they hold the title of senator, even though they're all in one chamber.
Right, which sort of harkens back to the prestige of the upper house they abolished.
It does.
But the truly radical element is the nonpartisan nature of the election. Candidates run without a party label on the ballot.
And while, of course, everyone knows their senator's political leaning once they're elected,
Sure.
the institution is fundamentally structured to deprioritize national party discipline. Leadership roles, including the speaker and committee chairs, are elected purely on merit or internal negotiation, not based on which party holds the majority.
So the natural question is, why? Why did Nebraska, a state that's generally conservative in nature, decide to toss out the classic bicameral model favored by nearly every other government in the Western world?
Let's dive into the history. So, before 1937,
Before the change, the bicameral system was plagued by the same issues it faces elsewhere: inefficiency, redundancy, high cost. But the champion for change was U.S. Senator George Norris.
one of the most famous progressives in American history.
Absolutely. Known nationally for his anti-establishment reformist views.
And Norris had this multi-layered argument. He famously said that in a state with primarily one class, meaning a largely agrarian and relatively uniform socioeconomic structure, having two legislative bodies doing the same thing was just an unnecessary duplication of effort and expense.
His argument was essentially populist common sense. Why pay for two to do the job of one?
But the key argument, and this is the one that spoke directly to voter distrust during the Great Depression, it centered on legislative accountability.
Right. Norris argued that bicameralism allowed for these secretive conference committees, where small groups of legislators from both houses meet behind closed doors to reconcile differing bill versions.
And they can just slip things in.
Exactly. They could insert last-minute provisions that neither house had publicly debated or voted on.
That sounds like the perfect recipe for special interest riders and just, well, opaque lawmaking.
And unicameralism was sold to the public as the antidote to that, a system where all the action happens in a single visible house, removing the opportunity for those backroom deals.
And that campaign worked. The unicameral system was adopted via a state initiative in 1934, motivated by that desire for budgetary efficiency and transparency. The first session was held in 1937.
And today, Nebraska maintains specific transparency rules that are quite modern. For example, bills can contain only one subject, and they have to receive a minimum of 5 days of public consideration before a final vote.
That structural push for efficiency, it even extends to checks and balances. The Nebraska legislature requires only a 3/5 majority to override a gubernatorial veto.
Right, and you should contrast that with the 2/3 requirement you see in many other states.
So what does that 3/5 threshold tell us about the power dynamic there?
It clearly shows that the legislative branch retains significant power over the executive. A lower override bar means the governor's veto is less absolute, it's easier for the legislature to overcome through consensus. The whole structure is designed to empower the collective legislative will over the potential obstruction of the executive branch.
And this unique system is housed in an equally unique structure: the Nebraska State Capitol in Lincoln. It's an architectural marvel built between 1922 and 1932, constructed from Indiana limestone.
It's not a classic dome at all. It features a massive 400-foot dome tower rising from this cross within a square base. It's a truly distinctive architectural statement.
And that tower is crowned by the sower.
A 19-foot bronze statue that represents agriculture and the foundational strength of the state's economy, literally towering over the governmental process.
So now let's connect that institutional structure to Nebraska's role on the national stage. Which brings us back to the other big anomaly, the split electoral vote. Why does this mechanism matter so much, particularly in a reliably Republican state?
Well, the mechanism is simple, but the impact is profound. We know 2 votes go statewide, but the other 3 are distributed 1 per congressional district. This means that if Democrats can win just 1 district, they break that winner-take-all monopoly.
And that single district is the 2nd congressional district, centered on Omaha. Help us understand the boundaries and the demographics of that district and why it's the perennial Democratic crack in that red wall.
So the 2nd district is the state's most urban. It encompasses Omaha and its core suburbs. It's significantly more diverse. It has a much higher concentration of white-collar workers, financial institutions, the University of Nebraska Omaha campus. It also includes Offutt Air Force Base.
So because of this urban, educated, and diverse profile,
Its political leanings just mirror many swing districts nationally. It contrasts sharply with the rural, agrarian interests that dominate the other 2 districts.
this structural certainty that the 2nd district will always be competitive has led to historical splits, most notably in 2008 and 2020, and even in the recent 2024 election.
Right. And it compels presidential candidates, even those who know they can't win Nebraska statewide, to campaign in Omaha because securing that single electoral vote might be nationally decisive.
It's a powerful mechanism for ensuring urban interests aren't completely ignored by the statewide party machines.
It forces a level of political nuance that is just absent in states like Texas or California, where the winner-take-all system allows candidates to ignore vast sections of the population.
And this inherent push and pull within the state's politics, it brings up a striking contradiction. Despite its overall conservative leaning, Nebraska has a really robust tradition of progressive social reforms.
This raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? Why does a historically Republican state sometimes lead the nation on social change? And the source material offers compelling evidence. Nebraska was the first U.S. state to outlaw sexual assault within a marriage in 1975.
Just think about the political heavy lifting required to pass a law like that 50 years ago. I mean, it required crossing some really deep-seated cultural lines.
Absolutely. And then 5 years later, in 1980, Nebraska was the first state in the nation to divest from South Africa in protest of the apartheid regime.
These were not minor, quiet legislative shifts. These were highly visible, politically risky actions that were far ahead of the curve nationally.
So if we connect this back to George Norris's vision, what does it suggest about that unicameral structure? How did the nonpartisan, transparent system facilitate these seemingly progressive wins?
It suggests that when legislators are removed from the immediate pressure of party labels and national platforms, they may be more inclined to vote based on constituent need or conscience or the compelling moral argument of a bill.
I think that's right. The nonpartisan structure inherently weakens the ability of national parties to enforce discipline. And that potentially allows for broader, often progressive, consensus on specific social justice issues, especially when those issues align with the state motto, equality before the law.
The takeaway here is profound. Nebraska is a working laboratory demonstrating that institutional design, the rules of the game, can sometimes trump underlying political ideology. Let's move now to the engine that funds this unique government, the economy.
When you look at Nebraska's economic profile, you see a deep foundation in agriculture, but a surprisingly sophisticated superstructure built on logistics, finance, and specialized manufacturing.
Agriculture remains the massive pillar, for sure. Nebraska is globally famous for its output. Beef, pork, wheat, corn, soybeans, sorghum. The overall economic scale is significant. Back in 2010, the gross state product was already nearly $90 billion, and that's only grown.
The diversification, though, that's the key to the state's resilience. Nebraska's success in navigating recent economic turbulence, which resulted in a record-breaking low unemployment rate of 1.9% in October 2021.
Incredible.
That's due to its strength in logistics and corporate headquarters.
And given its location, right at the geographical center of the U.S., logistics is paramount. Omaha serves as the headquarters of the Union Pacific Railroad, which was incorporated way back in 1862 and is still one of the largest freight-hauling railroads in North America.
And the physical infrastructure required to support that operation is just immense. The world's largest railroad classification yard, Bailey Yard, is located in North Platte.
What does that actually mean, classification yard?
It processes thousands of rail cars every single day. It acts as a massive operational hub that coordinates freight traffic across the entire continent. That single facility demonstrates Nebraska's vital importance to the national supply chain.
But Omaha's corporate identity extends far beyond rail. It's an unlikely financial and investment hub. And the most famous example, of course, is Berkshire Hathaway, led by Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha.
But beyond Berkshire, you have these giants in insurance and financial services. Mutual of Omaha, Woodman of the World, Emeritus. And they're also significant players in construction, like Kiowa Corporation, telecommunications with West Corporation, and data analytics with Gallup, all headquartered in the city.
This corporate concentration just proves that Nebraska's economy is anything but one-dimensional. Outside of Omaha, we see key businesses like Nelnet and Huddle, which are major players in student loan services and sports analytics software.
Right, based in Lincoln.
And we can't forget the outdoors retail giant Cabela's, which was founded and headquartered in Sydney, out in the Panhandle, reflecting that Western hunting and fishing culture of the region.
Let's talk about some surprising everyday inventions that sprang from Nebraska ingenuity, connecting back to that spirit of adaptation we saw in the sod house era.
Okay.
First, the official state soft drink, Kool-Aid.
I love this fact.
It was invented in 1927 by Edwin Perkins in Hastings. It was originally sold as a liquid concentrate called Fruit Smack, but Perkins figured out that shipping a powdered version was much, much cheaper. The town still celebrates this legacy every August during Kool-Aid days.
And second, the academic study guide that rescued generations of students, Cliff's Notes.
Developed by Clifton Hillegas of Rising City, Nebraska, these guides were adapted from Canadian publications but became an American academic staple, just small-town ingenuity solving a national problem of complex literature.
And finally, the indispensable workshop tool, the vice grip locking pliers.
Invented by William Peterson in DeWitt in 1924. This tool just embodied the mechanical innovation required by the agrarian economy, providing mechanics and farmers with a versatile locking tool.
We should also detail the highly specialized manufacturing sector, specifically Kawasaki Motors manufacturing in Lincoln. This isn't just an assembly plant, it's a global center of excellence.
It's the only Kawasaki plant globally that produces 3 distinct and crucial product lines: the jet ski, the ATV, and an MULE utility vehicle.
To all of them.
Every single one of those products sold globally originated from that Lincoln facility. It demonstrates a high level of trusted engineering and precision manufacturing in the state.
Now let's address the most significant structural element of the state's economy, a policy decision that is nearly as radical as the unicameral system itself.
Nebraska is the public power state.
Exactly.
That is precisely right. Nebraska is the only state in the U.S. where all electric utilities are publicly owned. There are no investor-owned utilities operating the power grid. And this is a monumental structural difference from nearly every other state.
And the history of this transition is rooted in the early 20th century. George Norris, the same senator who championed unicameralism, was also a fervent proponent of public power.
Right. He argued that essential services like electricity should not be controlled by private monopolies motivated by profit, but by public entities motivated by service and cost.
So the final investor-owned utility was purchased in 1946, completing that statewide transition. The primary argument was cost control and flood mitigation, especially concerning the development of hydroelectric projects on the Platte and Missouri rivers.
And this structure means that electric rates are generally not subject to the pressures of shareholder returns, though they do, of course, have to cover operational costs and infrastructure investment.
When we look at the energy mix today, Nebraska remains a massive producer of ethanol biofuels, the second largest nationally, which reflects its corn production.
And half of its electricity still comes from coal, but reflecting the infrastructure investments made by those public power districts, wind power is the fastest growing source in the state.
However, despite the public ownership designed for efficiency, Nebraska is a top 10 state for per capita energy consumption. If rates are low and supply is public, why the high consumption?
That high rate is directly linked to the state's economic pillars. You have enormous energy demands from the highly mechanized, irrigated agriculture sector, particularly in the summer.
And then coupled with that are the massive energy requirements of the meatpacking and food processing industries, which require constant high-volume energy input for refrigeration and processing.
The consumption is driven by industry, not just by residential use. It's a closed loop. The power system is public because the agricultural industry demands cheap, reliable power, which in turn leads to high consumption.
Shifting now to demographics, we see the defining tension of modern Nebraska, the vast, shrinking rural landscape versus the powerful, growing urban centers.
The rural character is just inescapable. The sources show that 89% of Nebraska's cities and towns have fewer than 3,000 residents, and hundreds of them contain fewer than 1,000. These are the small towns that form the social fabric of the plains.
But the data also shows a long-term shift. I mean, between 1990 and 2000 alone, 53 of the state's 93 counties experienced population decline. This trend creates real challenges for maintaining infrastructure, schools, and services in rural areas.
Conversely, the growth is heavily concentrated. The state's major urban centers, Omaha and Lincoln, have seen substantial recent growth. Lincoln, for instance, grew 14.5% between 2000 and 2010.
And Omaha is officially classified as the single metropolitan class city, and Lincoln is the primary class city.
Right, and outside of those two centers, the combined area of Grand Island, Hastings, and Kearney, often known as the Tri-Cities, forms an important regional economic and demographic hub in central Nebraska. It helps to balance the western and eastern concentrations.
Let's discuss ancestry, because it really challenges that monolithic view of the American heartland. Historically, German Americans are the largest ancestry group, comprising 36.1% of the population, often concentrated in the eastern and central counties.
But Nebraska also boasts two highly specific national leadership positions in ancestry. It has the highest percentage of Czech American and non-Mormon Danish American populations nationally, and that reflects these distinct waves of European settlement in the late 19th century.
And we have to note Thurston County, which is entirely made up of the Omaha and Winnebago reservations, and has a unique demographic profile, an American Indian majority. A powerful reminder of the land's original inhabitants and continuous sovereignty.
But here's where Nebraska truly becomes a modern global crossroads: its role as a refugee hub.
This is a truly remarkable fact that often surprises people.
It does. In 2016, Nebraska welcomed more refugees per capita than any other state in the nation. This wasn't accidental. It was driven by a robust network of nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and community resources, all committed to resettlement.
And the most striking example is the Yazidi community. Lincoln serves as the largest home for Yazidi refugees and Yazidi Americans in the entire United States.
It's providing a safe haven for this specific community that has fled genocidal violence in Iraq and Syria.
The broader influx of immigrants is reflected in the top countries of origin: Mexico, India, China, Guatemala, and El Salvador. These populations are often drawn by available labor in the logistics, service, and meatpacking industries, fueling the economic growth of the urban and Tri-Cities areas.
And this increasing diversity is dramatically illustrated in the state's birth data analysis. We can track a significant and really rapid demographic shift between 2013 and 2023.
Okay, so looking at the live birth data by the mother's ethnicity, the trend is undeniable. In 2013, births to white mothers constituted 73.7% of the total. Births to Hispanic mothers were 14.9%.
And then you fast forward a decade. By 2023, the share of births to white mothers dropped to 64.9%. That's nearly a 9-point reduction. Concurrently, the percentage of births to Hispanic mothers surged to 20.8%.
This data is so critical. It shows that Nebraska is one of the fastest changing demographic states in the heartland.
Yeah, and this shift impacts everything, from the language needs in public schools to the types of businesses being started, and the future political electorate we were just discussing, linking right back to the strength of the 2nd Congressional District.
Let's round out this section with culture, education, and the passion point for many Nebraskan: sports.
The state has a comprehensive higher education system, led by the University of Nebraska system, with campuses in Lincoln, Kearney, Omaha, and the Medical Center.
And the academic foundation is solid, but the cultural obsession is amateur athletics.
It is. Nebraska has a massive presence across NCAA and AIA and NJCAA levels. We are talking about the highest tier of college sports, smaller four-year schools, and community colleges, showing a deep, pervasive commitment to athletics at every level of education.
The religious devotion, of course, is directed primarily at the University of Nebraska Cornhuskers football program. But the ultimate centerpiece of the sports year is baseball. Omaha has hosted the College World Series since 1950.
The culmination of the NCAA Division I Baseball Championship. It was hosted first at Rosenblatt Stadium and now at Charles Schwab Field, Omaha. This event is not just a sporting spectacle, it's an annual, massive economic and cultural institution for the city, bringing tens of thousands of visitors and a national spotlight every June.
And while college sports dominate, professional sports are emerging. We have the Omaha Supernovas and the Pro Volleyball Federation reflecting the sport's popularity in the region.
And Union Omaha in USL League One soccer, alongside established minor league teams. It's a community defined by its deep roots, European history, and a surprising, welcoming posture toward global newcomers, all wrapped up in a deep passion for the local institutions.
Our deep dive into the Cornhusker State has really revealed a landscape of striking contradictions. Far from being a simple, uniform plains state, Nebraska is an outlier. It's an American exception defined by its institutional choices.
We connected the name, Flat Water, to its core geography, and we traced its early history from the devastating Villashore Massacre to the sought-home era of the Homestead Act. We mapped that profound geographical split between the rich, dissected-till plains and the vast, arid Great Plains.
Institutionally, it stands completely alone, the only state with a nonpartisan unicameral legislature, a system specifically designed by Senator George Norris to maximize transparency and efficiency by eliminating backroom deals and legislative redundancy.
And this commitment to governmental accountability is mirrored in the state's economic structure. It's the only state where all electric utilities are publicly owned, a decision rooted in populist concerns over fairness and cost control for its massive agricultural base.
And federally, it forces complexity through the split electoral college vote, ensuring that the urban Omaha district retains political weight on the national stage, even as the state leans conservative overall.
We also noted that despite that conservative leaning, the state has a powerful track record of progressive social reform, leading the nation in outlawing sexual assault within a marriage and divesting from apartheid South Africa. The institutional structure appears to enable cross-party consensus on moral imperatives.
And finally, the modern demographic profile reveals a state that's rapidly embracing its status as a global crossroads, welcoming more refugees per capita than any other state and seeing a rapid, accelerating shift in its birth data profile.
So let's revisit the state motto, equality before the law. Given Nebraska's foundation built on transparency and nonpartisanship, and its history of unexpected social reform, what can this highly structured, unusual state teach us about political accountability and social change today?
Well, it encourages us to look beyond party labels and consider that structure truly is policy. The removal of overt party branding in the legislature, combined with strict transparency rules like that 5-day consideration rule, it seems to have created a political environment where legislative senators might find it easier to act on their conscience or their constituents' immediate needs rather than strictly following a rigid national party line.
It forces the question, doesn't it? If the goals of George Norris, transparency, efficiency, and representation unburdened by national party friction, were applied nationwide through nonpartisan, single-chamber legislatures, would we see a similar pattern of surprising, ahead-of-the-curve social reforms, even in deeply partisan political environments?
Nebraska, the quiet exception hidden in the American heartland, demonstrates that political innovation is still possible and that the institutional rules matter far more than we often realize. It's definitely something worth mulling over the next time you hear a political debate dominated by party rhetoric.